For as long as the first ink was dripped onto parchment and the first sconce was lit to ward off the darkness of night, brave and chivalrous nobles known as knights prevailed under the esteems that hold society together. They are the pillars upon which proper society rests, standing tall so that we might feel safe beneath them. But a shield is a hollow plate without a breast to guard, and a sword is but frigid steel unless it has a life to claim, or to keep. Whether it be a lord, a king, a princess, or a fauna in a lonely cabin, to be protected is to place the pace of one's heart into another's hand. The reliance one holds in their protector is a thin tightrope that will either lead to their continued survival or steer them to their demise. Good evening, everyone! Welcome to my lovey-dovey Valentine's Day picnic. If you're new here, hi! My name is Carmi. It's so nice to meet you. And if you've come back, hi! I'm so pleased to see you again. I've missed you so much. Near the end of Christmas, I released part 2 of my experience with 𝔄𝔯𝔱 30-day Arttober challenge, where I investigated various relationships and story beats with 𝔄𝔯𝔱 𝔓𝔓𝔬𝔤𝔓, a story I've been conceptualizing for a while now. I used that time as an excuse to expand the universe surrounding Carmi, a character that's both my art persona and my OC. It's an odd distinction to make, but I'd like to say that Carmi was an art persona first, but I got attached to another design for a while and used that instead. Then I started using her as a side character, but I loved that design so much that I decided to separate the idea of Carmi as an OC and Carmi as my art persona. So, I need you to do me a solid and keep those two characters separate in your head. Since Carmi is my art persona, she's obviously gonna have a lot of my personality behind her, but please don't look at what she does as a fictional character and think that's me. I'm basically just using her as a 2D meat suit so I don't have to deal with the stress of being on camera. I mention all this to say that I don't condone or support all of Carmi's actions in this story. I simply want to tell a tale that will engage those who want to listen. Now that that's out of the way, let's explore the world of 𝔄𝔯𝔱 𝔓𝔓𝔬𝔓𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬𝔬 perhaps that stumbled across this video on its own, I thought it best to re-explain the plot. The artwork I don't post on the internet tends to deal with darker topics, and the longer you make that kind of art, the more it starts to impact your emotional state. To mitigate burnout, I pivoted my aesthetic toward a more fantastical framework, and from this, 𝔲𝔢𝔱 was born. But knowing me, it didn't take long before I began shattering the wonderland that I built. 𝔲𝔢𝔱 takes place sometime between long ago and yesterday, functioning as a modernist fairy tale. While the setting utilizes folk tales as a foundation, 𝔲𝔢𝔱 is more reminiscent of movies like Shrek or Ella Enchanted, where the execution relies on contemporary whimsy. As the title suggests, 𝔲𝔢𝔱's realm primarily consists of fauna or animals, but more like Winnie the Pooh, Beatrix Potter stories, or Mother Goose, rather than stories like Zootopia. Unlike the grounded socio-political realism of Zootopia, which utilizes animal characters as a direct mirror for human society, 𝔲𝔢𝔱 leans into the surrealism of works like Alice in Wonderland. This distinction is vital. Where Zootopia demands logic, 𝔲𝔢𝔱 prioritizes nonsensical appeal. With that in mind, there might be socio-economic aspects that many viewers can't help but connect to our world, so I won't make a big fuss if that comparison comes up anyhow, especially if it means they'll find this story relatable, comforting, or thought-provoking in any way. By eating away the limitations of realism, I can allow this realm to be unapologetically strange, baking a cake of sweet modern sensibilities with a spongy core of pastoral absurdity. In the temperate grasslands of 𝔲𝔢𝔱 lies a cabin just barely isolated at the edge of the village, and in that quaint little cabin lives a creature of a peculiar likeness. She was a creature that struck many as aimlessly stitched together, a lanky young fauna that lived as a living mosaic. From the waist up, her skin was dusky and unsettlingly bare, devoid of a protective coat of fur customary to her peers. Nevertheless, beneath her spine, a tufted lion's tail trailed along her back, and a snowy white fleece began to grow.
She has the clever hands of a primate and the sturdy, wool-covered legs of a ewe that anchor her to the earth whenever her horns urge her eyes to look too high above the clouds. To look upon them is to witness a gentle war of nature. In one faction, there's an onslaught of a soft, glaze-like gaze of a lamb, and on the other, an assault sharp and cold, forged only for the fiercest of beasts. What pedigree of fauna could have made such an unbalanced creature to embolden the humble village of Faunus Acre? Carmi Pecorella Lambillotte, or just Carmi, is the result of such mysterious breeding methods. Carmi's character aligns closely with the gamine Pollyanna or ingenue archetype. They try to be virtuous, seeking to get along with everyone they meet, but ultimately they're rather awkward and naive, which gets them in a heap of trouble from time to time. Carmi is also a bit of a space cadet, daydreaming their way through life with falsehoods and fantasies of being saved by a knight in shining armor. Her idea of love comes almost entirely from shoujo manga and visual novels. So, it's not a good or realistic perception of love in the slightest. If I had to compare her to an existing character, I'd say she's pretty similar to Hachi Komatsu from Nana. Yup, a certified girl failure, but I love her anyway. They're primarily based on Little Red Riding Hood, a cautionary tale for children to be wary of those with impure intentions, and the Greek god Pan, a deity of the undomesticated rustic world. Pan is a satyr, so Carmi visually mirrors satyrs, but in Faunus Acre, Carmi is actually considered a chimera. Satyrs are a mythological species, while Carmi is the result of an obscure genetic combination. While satyrs are known to reflect more human features, Carmi has more animalistic characteristics, such as claws and sharper canines, referencing a possibly more mixed heritage. And as far as the story goes, satyrs don't exist, and neither do humans. While the character of Little Red Riding Hood is intended to be a child, Carmi is a freshly aged adult at 19, which still makes them vulnerable to exploitation, especially since Carmi has trouble socializing with people other than her brother and her grandmother. However, as the story progresses, Carmi will naturally age and grow in character. On that note, Carmi is rather fixated on becoming more independent, as for most of her life, she's been taken care of by her grandmother and especially her older brother, Brother Tiger. Carmi is on the autism spectrum, which makes other fauna subconsciously underestimate her value as a person, getting the weird younger sibling or strange social outcast label from other villagers. Because of this, Carmi fiercely defends the prospects of doing things on their own, but much to their frustration, she's also deplorably clumsy, leading to Brother Tiger saving her in the end. Brother Tiger loves his sibling. I'd even go so far as to call him doting, but he also views Carmi as incompetent, and that upsets her even further. Though she won't admit it out loud, Carmi also believes she's incompetent and is determined to grow from their many supposed cumbering flaws. The reason this vexes Carmi so much is less by virtue of her pride, and more to do with her belief that her dependency on her brother is thwarting him from living his life fully. For example, when Brother Tiger is out too late with his own friends, she starts to overthink and wonder if he's in danger. She also has a hard time falling asleep if he's not in the same room, as she suffers from reoccurring night terrors. Whenever Brother Tiger got into trouble in relationships with his past girlfriends, Carmi always blamed herself, thinking that her asocial behaviors may have freaked them out and turned them away. This obviously isn't the case, but due to her low self-esteem and past with bullying during her school days, she still believes it. Additionally, she thinks so highly of her older brother that the possibility that Brother Tiger simply went through normal relationship problems like everyone else never crosses her mind. In fact, every time Carmi fails to make friends or has an awkward social interaction, she'll self-criticize herself on a disturbingly harsh level. Nonetheless, Carmi wants to steer away from her intense codependency on her brother, as it makes her feel useless and dumb. The caveat in this is that she's terrified of the outside world. Carmi is naturally asocial on their own, but Brother Tiger's overprotective instincts don't help their case either. He has practical reasoning to be overprotective, as Carmi has a bad past with men touching her unconsensually, not only as an adult, but sadly in her former years as well. I'd like to go into this a bit more, as that extra bit of context into Carmi's past traumas will make what she does more understandable, but I don't want to push my limits here on YouTube. I'll try to make a blog post on Patreon, respectfully explaining Carmi's psychology a bit more, but with the context clues here, I don't think anyone will miss out on anything too big. All in all, Carmi has decided to move away from her beloved cabin and older brother and change scenes to the big city. Will Carmi succeed in building a life that's her own, or will leaning too hard on independence cause her to isolate herself? If she does, who will manage to pull her out of isolation? Carmi spends much of the first part of Faunus Acre living in the cabin with her older brother, trying to become naturally more independent through activities such as managing finances, practicing proper self-care, and improving her social skills by making new friends. 𝔬𝔯𝔢 is more of a side character than a main character, regularly visiting the two fauna from the city. He often hung out with both of them, but when Brother Tiger was busy doing something else, 𝔬𝔯𝔢 would still go on friendly playdates with Carmi. Carmi and 𝔬𝔯𝔢 had known each other since they were both minors, but Carmi was an intense shut-in in her teenage years, so 𝔬𝔯𝔢 really only knew her as Brother Tiger's depressed little sister who was too anxious to talk to him one-on-one. It wasn't until Carmi took the initiative to free herself from the shackles of codependency that she found the strength to stop looking at the ground, and when her eyes finally met with 𝔬𝔯𝔢, an almost immediate connection was made. Of course, understanding that Carmi was a shut-in not too long ago, their interactions were still rather awkward, but what enabled the connection to grow further was 𝔬𝔯𝔢's patience with his new awkward acquaintance, something Carmi wasn't used to when making new friends. This created an instantaneous safe space for Carmi to express herself to this new but familiar confidant, especially since Brother Tiger, a person Carmi trusts, fully trusts 𝔬𝔯𝔢. Most of 𝔬𝔯𝔢's info on Carmi came from Brother Tiger, so of course, 𝔬𝔯𝔢 started to develop compassion for his friend's younger sibling, notwithstanding her avoidance from him before her revelation. Carmi noticed that 𝔬𝔯𝔢 didn't open up as much as she did, but at the time, she didn't think much of it and hoped that one day she'd provide the same safe space for him as he did for her. At first glance, 𝔬𝔯𝔢 gives off a friendly but strangely unapproachable appearance. With his soft eyes, he appears dependable and trustworthy, yet remains strangely aloof to his surroundings, maintaining a cool and collected demeanor. He prefers things to be this way, as he never wants others to know what's truly going on in his head. He doesn't open up much to anyone, including his best friend Brother Tiger. He feels that others don't deserve to know, as it would leave him vulnerable to emotional sabotage, making him seem almost unreachable. On the rare occasion that he does open up, it'll either be when he's in an emotionally unstable state or to someone he considers on a higher level to him. You see, 𝔬𝔯𝔢 loves to compartmentalize things. Objects, feelings, and even other fauna. In his mind, people live on different levels. The higher your level, the more likely he'll be to talk with you. Those who are respected in their field, have more experience in life, or an overall sense of maturity, tend to be on these higher levels. If you find yourself on a lower level, 𝔬𝔯𝔢 won't waste his time standing around you. If you're not on a similar wavelength to his standards, in his subconscious, you're not worth holding a conversation with. 𝔬𝔯𝔢 doesn't mean to do this to be cruel. He sees leveling as an act of efficacy. He values structural integrity, so he's cutthroat when categorizing other people. At this point in his life, he sees things as either high quality or defective. In his social circle, he gravitates to fauna he classifies as exceptional. If there are too many flaws in one fauna, they are almost immediately relegated to a lower level of his attention or time. 𝔬𝔯𝔢 is obsessed with his goals as an architect and views networking as a method of survival, down to who he calls his friends and to a greater extent who he decides to marry in the future. In the simplest terms, 𝔬𝔯𝔢 puts people on 3 levels. The high level, which will be his innermost circle, the people he respects the most and will humble himself around. On the rare occasion when he needs to open up to someone, he'll go to these people. On the second level, we have the in-betweeners. They're the ones he predicts he'll find useful in the future or sees potential in. He is cordial to them and sometimes will want to know about their personal life, but keeps a clear boundary by never opening up. And then there's the lowest level. These are the fauna he perceives as lazy, unskilled, or overly governed by raw emotion, those who will not be remembered in the history books. It's not that he hates them, they simply don't exist to him. Although Carmi would usually be placed on a lower level, with her high tense awkwardness and outwardly perceived incompetence, 𝔲𝔯𝔢 sees Carmi's skills in the arts as exceptional. Not to say that she's on the same level as him, of course, but he sees massive potential for her to rise in the ranks, and so he takes a particularly keen interest in her. He also can't help but be secretly drawn to weird people, even if that goes against his social code. So, funnily enough, he's always the one initiating the hangouts with Carmi. Besides, Carmi is much too timid to initiate playdates anyway. It's rather strange, because I see 𝔲𝔯𝔢 as someone who loves to analyze humanity, but he still struggles to humanize on an individual level. Of course, when I talk about humanity, I'm referring to fauna, not humans. Maybe I need to make up a word to replace that. Fauna kind? I might need some help on this. Let me know what you think. Anyways, back on topic. When he allows himself to compartmentalize other fauna, he grants himself the permission to detach from them. To him, this ensures he'll be safe from getting hurt in the rare chance that betrayal ever finds him. Brother Tiger tries his best to support Carmi's plans to move to the big city, but he can't help but worry whether or not he shows it on the outside. So, he turns to someone whom he considers a trusted friend to look after his beloved sister, just as dutifully as he does. 𝔲𝔯𝔢, who does have a care for Carmi, albeit a bit skewed, is more than willing to help, especially if it means he'll get closer to someone who could potentially heighten his image. Carmi may make impulsive decisions at times, but 𝔲𝔯𝔢 always initiates. He categorizes, judges, and then forges a narrative based on those former assessments. Carmi, desperate for validation and a knight in shining armor, is perfectly primed to be molded by him.
Now that the characters are introduced, let's get to the main point of the video. Day 31's Coffeetober prompt was game over. I originally intended to create a pixel art piece, but for some reason, my mind went blank. I found myself torn between a standard Otome composition and a 3D-esque screenshot. Both felt like viable options, so why was I so conflicted? By the time I actually started sketching, the truth began to reveal itself to me. I was itching to do something different. After a month of rapid-fire prompts and daily challenges, I realized how much I missed the agonizing slow burn of a long-term painting. It sounds silly, right? I reckon most artists dread making a piece that drags on, but the pressure of completing an artwork every day made me crave that feeling of contemplating on a single piece. In the end, I decided to be self-indulgent and make an art piece that leaned more into my OC's toxic relationship rather than one that directly tied itself to video game aesthetics. Looking back at my older prompts, I noticed I hadn't explored 𝔲𝔯𝔢 and Carmi's dynamic at all. I touched on it symbolically with the white wolf, and I mentioned him a few times in the previous Coffeetober videos, but he hasn't been the main focus until now. I'm taking this opportunity to give him a dedicated piece of art and psychoanalyze exactly what makes his connection with Carmi so toxic. Now, if you recall, the moment Carmi decided to move away from Faunus Acre directly correlates to her insecurities surrounding holding her brother back from living a fulfilling life. Because she looks up to her brother so much and inversely thinks so low of herself, she believes the bulk of Brother Tiger's problems derive from her being so close in his presence, especially with her being an autistic adult.
I want to add here that the idea of autism or people with autism with Carmi and Carmi's society is not reflective of how I think of autism. How Carmi views her own autism is a reflection of the society she grew up in. In directly asking how he felt about her living with him, it would be revealed that Brother Tiger actually depends on Carmi much more than she thinks.
But because of Brother Tiger's caged personality and Carmi's low self-worth, neither of them opens up to each other. Carmi witnesses how free and happy he looks when hanging out with his other friends and longs to be the kind of sibling who enables him to act the same way around her. Her false theories only get pushed further when Brother Tiger isolates himself whenever he feels crummy, directly contrasting with how Brother Tiger is the first person she goes to when she has a problem. What she doesn't know is that Brother Tiger wants to be softer with her, and that she is the only place where he can feel safe showing that softer side. Brother Tiger enjoys hanging out with his friends, of course, but he still puts on a mask to be around them. Carmi is a sanctuary to feel softer, yet all the same, Brother Tiger is afraid to be completely vulnerable around her, fearing that she won't view him as her protector if he shows more transparent signs of vulnerability. Regardless of his softer side, he still feels the need to fulfill that protector role, especially when Carmi's past comes into context. This is why I see Brother Tiger and 𝔲𝔯𝔱 as foils. In storytelling studies, a foil is a character whose traits precisely contrast with another character to emphasize qualities the author wants you to pay attention to, or by proposing a different perspective on a similar situation. They both have a shared history with Carmi since childhood. Although 𝔲𝔯𝔱 doesn't know much of Carmi's past at the beginning of Faunus Acre, they both know of Carmi's basic personality traits and have a semblance of trust for one another as friends. Despite their strong and competent-looking outward appearances, they both struggle with their self-worth and with depression. The difference between Carmi and the two knights is that Carmi impulsively shows her low self-worth through her words and actions, while the knights remain externally impassive. This may sound counterintuitive, as I explained many qualities that would parallel Brother Tiger to 𝔲𝔯𝔱 not even a minute ago. In this dynamic, both men function as dual towers of guardianship, yet they occupy vastly different psychological spaces. Brother Tiger operates under a traditional protector archetype, viewing his stewardship over Carmi as a hereditary duty, one he formally, albeit precariously, delegates to 𝔲𝔯𝔱 upon her departure for the city. 𝔲𝔯𝔱, however, reframes this guardianship through the lens of mentorship. By focusing on her artistic potential, he creates a power imbalance that masks his control as guidance, a narrative Carmi readily adopts when she projects the knight in shining armor trope onto him to satisfy her own need for external validation. Despite these outward roles of competence, both men are mirrors of one another in their emotional avoidance. They utilize their status as protectors to maintain a stoic facade, guarding their own vulnerabilities to preempt the risk of emotional injury. This shared pathology creates a false sense of security for Carmi, who mistakes their defensive walls for structural strength. This, regardless of if they haven't completely opened up to each other about it, is why Brother Tiger and Carmi trust 𝔲𝔯𝔱 so quickly. Seeing much of himself in 𝔲𝔯𝔱, Brother Tiger trusts him as one of the few fauna who won't take advantage of Carmi. And Carmi, with her codependency on her brother, almost immediately clings to 𝔲𝔯𝔱's facade for protection and validation once she's all alone in the big city. And of course, 𝔲𝔯𝔱 obliges. This is where the foil comes in, their fundamental moral codes. Brother Tiger's care for Carmi is ultimately rooted in something genuine. He wants to provide the same sanctuary for Carmi that she does for him. 𝔲𝔯𝔱's care for Carmi somewhat reveals itself at times, but in the end, it's superficial, as he doesn't have much respect for Carmi as a person. While 𝔲𝔯𝔱 has an expansive network of connections to bolster his architectural career, his view on life keeps him trapped in a paradoxical isolation. He operates under the cynical assumption that his authentic self is fundamentally unlovable, so he relies on a rigid leveling system to segregate himself from others. Conversely, Brother Tiger offers an ethical counterpoint. His egalitarian framework treats worth as independent from social standing. For Tiger, respect is a baseline entitlement for all fauna, and disgust is reserved solely for those who objectify or harm the vulnerable. The tragedy rests in his inability to recognize that the very predatory behaviors he detests prevail within his own inner circle, curated by 𝔲𝔯𝔱's facade. Instead of starting with a few thumbnail sketches, I went right into posing because at first, I wasn't sure how long this piece would take or how much effort I'd put into it. The idea for the pose came from an initial concept drawing in which I would use a cel-shaded art style, but I couldn't get the anatomy to a place where I felt comfortable enough to start, so I put it on the back burner. I looked to the reference photo again, which had Ashton Kutcher and Brittany Murphy, RIP, in an embrace. There were a couple of photos of them in a similar pose, so I reckon it came from a set. I looked at the rest of the photos and ruminated on whether I should use those instead, but I was ultimately determined to use this exact photo for 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡 and Carmi. The other poses looked too tender for the art piece I wanted to make. This pose is rather intimate, so the viewer can assume that some kind of romance is going on, but that's the only bit of romance I want in this piece. Carmi's legs are wrapped around one of 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡's legs, showing her basal reliance on 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡. At first glance, it could be assumed that she's hugging him back with her other hand, but with a closer look, you can see that she's being abducted, a reference to how her current relationship makes her recall her past traumas, regardless of the fact that 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡's actions don't exactly mirror her triggers. 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡's pose looks like he's tenderly embracing Carmi, but he's actually resource guarding her. He feigns indifference toward their affair, but grows territorial when she mentions other men, betraying his refusal to commit. I wanted to put his tail between his legs to show that, despite his outer appearance, he's actually just afraid to be vulnerable, but it didn't work well compositionally. I instead opted for a low-hanging tail to show a lack of predatory confidence in his decisions. He knows this is wrong, and a part of him aches when he sees Carmi cry, but he still chooses his own desires over Carmi's well-being. Carmi's other hand holds a dagger, not only representing her fear of breaking off their fractured bond, but also the fear of cutting out 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡 after he showed his vulnerable side to her, refusing to confirm his biases about love and trust. This also foreshadows her encounter with the fabled white wolf, but I'll get into that when the time is right. In the sprawling city of Thistledown, Carmi finds herself adrift with no connections other than 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡. The initial plan to gain more independence crumbled at her hooves as the isolation and mounting fears of the city began to erode her resolve. She inevitably retreated into old habits, seeking sanctuary and comfort in the one familiar face she had left. 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡 encouraged this behavior, constantly initiating hangouts and awkwardly creating opportunities for Carmi to confide in him, almost as if he were forcing himself into the role of her mentor. Carmi, on the other hand, hoped for friendship with 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡 and craved for equal footing. Driven by a desperate loneliness that made any connection feel vital, she was consumed by the need to look cool in front of her new companion. She had hoped to initiate a platonic bond, but with 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡's urges to compartmentalize, this would soon prove to be a harder task than initially predicted. If you want any visualizations for what Thistledown is like and how different it is from Carmi's hometown, think of it like this. Thistledown is more metropolitan. Think of cities like New York or Hong Kong, while Faunus Acre, the place Carmi is much more accustomed to, is like the Appalachian countryside in the United States, or the idyllic rolling hills of England. Different settings, different sounds, and most importantly, different people. When Carmi was preoccupied with looking cool in front of her new friend, 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡 began to harbor much more salacious thoughts about his best friend's younger sister. Given her total lack of romantic experience, it was rather easy to tease little old Carmi. For years, Carmi had lived as a shut-in, avoiding not only 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡, but nearly everyone around her, always looking down or avoiding eye contact at all costs. Once she was finally alone with 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡, she had no choice but to look at him. When their eyes met, it felt as though they had known each other for years. 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡, well aware of her awkward nature, used his soft eyes to quell her fears and looked back at her. His eyes would often linger on her form, and much to his amusement, it kept Carmi in a perpetual state of flustered blushing. Knowing Carmi looks up to him, 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡 weaponized his warm demeanor to steer her into conversations far more personal or perverted than she is prepared for. Though she tries to pivot away from these lustful topics, 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡 always secures the flustered reaction he craves, temporarily satisfying his need to control the dynamic. In the beginning, Carmi always tried to put a boundary between herself and 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡, clinging to the hope that her crush would eventually blossom into a genuine, healthy friendship. Back in Faunus Acre, whenever the night grew too quiet and malignant shadows began to hang over the walls, Brother Tiger was there to help quell his little sister's fears. It never bothered Brother Tiger, as the solution was as simple as dragging her blankets and pillows into his room. He quite enjoyed the nights where they'd watch movies together, cuddled up side by side until sleep finally claimed them both. But Thistledown is a world away from that safety. 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡 remained oblivious to her night terrors until a late-night hangout stretched too long, forcing Carmi to stay at his apartment. In a moment of sharp, uncomfortable self-awareness, 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔡 decided against sharing a bed. To keep his own lustful thoughts in check, he insisted she sleep on a beanbag chair in his room. Hardly a comfortable substitute for a real bed, but in the very least, it would keep his lustful thoughts at bay. As the night deepened, the silence was broken by tremors from the corner of the room. From behind, Carmi appeared awake, yet her entire body was convulsing in a silent, visible terror. Panicked and unsure if he was witnessing a nightmare or a seizure, a wave of genuine fear swept over 𝔬𝔯𝔢 as he rushed to her side to wake her. Carmi was trapped in a nightmare. Once he assured her of her safety, 𝔬𝔯𝔢 breathed a sigh of relief. To calm her nerves, 𝔬𝔯𝔢 offered to let Carmi sleep in his bed. Though clearly flustered, Carmi thought of Brother Tiger and tried to frame the situation as she would at home. 𝔬𝔯𝔢 only wanted to comfort her. It should be fine, right? Despite their best efforts to suppress their growing feelings, the air between them choked with an unspoken tension. To be completely honest with himself, 𝔬𝔯𝔢 found a dark thrill in their proximity. He silently relished the way her heart would hammer against his chest whenever he drew her into an embrace. At first bud, moments like this felt cherished, even innocent, but as they were standing on a dangerous cliff, their blooming intimacy acted as the first step down a treacherous path, one that would eventually cause 𝔬𝔯𝔢 to lose his grip on his most feral impulses.
Snow is crazy. Oh, hi, little bunny. Did you know that there's a Carmi Bunny Patreon? Become a patron and get access to tutorials focused on art education without the student debt, works in progress for both my normal art and future videos, Twitch VODs, and works of a more adult taste. You can sign up as a florette, where you can get access to a more uncensored Carmi. It's easy to get demonetized on YouTube for discussing more sensitive topics. This tier will allow you to hear me talk about those scarier things. Also, sometimes it takes a long time for me to reply to comments, and sometimes I don't even get notifications for them. With this tier, you'll have better access for asking questions when I hold Q&As. I'll be sure to hold a Q&A for this video in particular. Sign up to be a lambkin, and you'll get access to works in progresses such as quick snaps and sometimes short clips of current projects or sketches. You'll also get access to concept art, early uploads, tutorials and brush packs, and speed paints. Become a chimera and you'll have access to my adult art and works in progresses, artworks in full resolution, a YouTube shoutout at the end of my videos, and of course, all other previous tier rewards. The Patreon's definitely a little baby right now, but I hope the community and community interaction can grow in numbers in the foreseeable future, both here on Patreon and on any other social media I'm on. I get excited every time I get a notification saying I got a new comment. And above all, even without the Patreon, this program is in part brought to you by viewers like you. Thank you!
In the golden halls of Olympus, Aphrodite was bound by law to Hephaestus, the smith god. Their coupling was a cage of duty, cold and unfeeling. But Ares was different. He did not smell of the forge. He somehow smelled both fresh and aflame at once, and had the frantic heartbeat of the fray. Aphrodite couldn't help but get caught in his blaze. Whether her union with Hephaestus treated her as a commodity, Ares was a wildfire that made her feel intangible. His inferno flashed over her forest of myrtle as he looked at Aphrodite with the sightless, starving passion of a man who had finally found something worth more than conquest. But the two lovers could not hide from the sun. Helios was the first to see them. From his chariot in the heavens, he watched as the god of war laid down his blood-stained spear at the foot of Aphrodite's bed. Ares, the most feared god of bloodshed and destruction, became a clumsy subordinate to her whims. In those secret hours, The requisite of earthly violence went quiet. They believed they were invisible, hidden by the velvet cloak of night, but passion will always leave a trail of heat that even the gods can't ignore. Helios whispered the truth into the ear of the cuckolded smithy, and Hephaestus soon forged a plan. He returned to his anvil and hammered out the net to drape over the lover's bed. When Ares next drew Aphrodite into his arms, the trap snapped shut. The more they struggled, the tighter the shimmering threads bit into their skin. They were frozen in their shame. The wild, impulsive Ares and the goddess of beauty, caught in a manifestation of their own entanglement. Hephaestus threw open the doors and invited the gods of Olympus to witness the spectacle. He expected fury. He expected the heavens to tremble at the violation of his marriage. But instead, there was laughter. The gods looked upon the god of war, helpless and naked in a fisherman's net, and they mocked him. But neither the shame of laughter nor the deceit of faith could hold back the guiltless truth in both Ares and Aphrodite. War and love are both irrational and capable of stripping even a god of his dignity. Ares had allowed his emotional impulsivity to lead him into a cage, and Aphrodite had allowed her urge to be wanted to blind her to the smith's cold net. At first glance, it's obvious which role each character will play. It'd be easy to cast Sir Wolf as Ares, given his cutthroat disposition and the inherent cruelty he exercises for his own psychological gain. And on the other paw, with Carmi's desperate fixation on romance and her soft, unassuming nature, she seems like the perfect fit for Aphrodite. However, if you move beyond these superficial traits and examine the structural core of the Ares-Aphrodite allegory, you'll see that the positions are quite accurately switched. It's Carmi who embodies the raw and bridled passion of Ares, while Sir Wolf is more like Aphrodite, the alluring but detached catalyst who initiates the affair, who, above all else, craves the attention of Ares' passion. And to add one more complication into the mix, Sir Wolf has a girlfriend. Yes, Carmi and Sir Wolf have found themselves entangled in an affair. This is why Carmi kept fighting to keep her crush in check. Sir Wolf would constantly vent about how his partner annoyed him, and, excited that he was finally confiding in her, Carmi would patiently listen, offering advice to soothe the various growing frictions in his relationship. Despite her own heart, she believed it was best to keep her feelings a secret. Carmi may not know much about love, but she knows that cheating is wrong. As the tension between them becomes unbearable, Carmi quickly finds herself melting under the pressure. Sir Wolf's real lover is a light gray wolf named Grease. Intensely ambitious, with an elegant smoothness perfect for networking, Grease works as a nurse practitioner. She meticulously planned her path to success and fortune, sharing Sir Wolf's disgust for the lazy, but not to the same extent that Sir Wolf does. She can be a bit volatile with her words when she fights with Sir Wolf, but she isn't a bad person. All things considered, whilst Carmi has never met Grease face to face, she thinks quite highly of her and thinks Sir Wolf deserves a partner of a similar caliber. But because of her grounded and structured plans, having a boyfriend won't stop her from moving far away if it means she can achieve her goals. Grease now lives in the city of Frostfell, a community built on the Arctic, frozen plateaus of the northern border. Isolated from his lover, Sir Wolf feels his connection with Grease has suffered, but isn't quite ready to let her go. Sir Wolf has a complicated love for Grease. Somewhere deep inside him, affection grows, but because of his compartmentalizing faults and unwillingness to fully open up to anyone, the relationship is quite icy. He doesn't love her as fully as one's supposed to in a relationship. The friction between Sir Wolf's distant attitude and Grease's cold candor leads to frequent headbutting, gradually souring their connection. They are constantly breaking up and getting back together, so it's always hard to tell when they're in a good spot or not. On top of this, Sir Wolf also subconsciously views Grease as another one of his assets. She fits perfectly into his high-standard, networking-focused lifestyle and actually sees a future where they can be together. He loves her, but in his unhealed, jumbled-up way. With her living far away, he's lost his only source of emotional and physical stability. Now, he projects that need onto Carmi, despite having no intentions of being with her. Grease meets his emotional needs, while Carmi fills the physical void, a role that feels like torture when clashing with her past traumas. Sir Wolf already understands her history, having personally witnessed her harassment by the men of Thistledown and intervened when things turned dangerous, but still goes on to sleep with Carmi. Since I went into this thinking I wouldn't be working on it too long, I didn't exactly have the best approach from the start, which would eventually bite me in the ass later in the process. There was no thumbnailing involved, so almost every part of this process involved a bit of winging it out and trying different colors, lighting, or pose adjustments to an extreme degree. Not that I don't adjust those things when I decide to include more planning in my process, but this piece had way more issues than the average painting. Trust me, every major painting I do is going to stress me out in some capacity. The colors for the two figures were easier to figure out since I had tons of previous artworks to look back on. Both Carmi's skin tone and the red accents in her outfit are extremely warm and extremely saturated, so there'd be a lot of natural contrast with 𝔬𝔯𝔢𝔓 duller, darker palette. I chose cooler shades of blue in the shadow of Carmi's dress to make sure that the warm tones wouldn't overwhelm the piece. Even with my color choices, I still had trouble making sure Carmi belonged in the setting. To be fair to myself, the original background's color palette ended up way different by the end. My original background had much brighter tints and hues, but the figures started to disappear, especially with all the background details. I was starting to get frustrated because I still wanted a detailed background, but there was no way I was going to end up with the proper artwork if I kept going the way I was. I took a step back from this piece and started working on part 4 of my MLP redesign series. I recognized I was on a deadline, but I never want to force myself to finish an artwork I know isn't going well, so I took a quick week-long break from it to cool off. I wanted to release this video in January, but I realized a video exploring relationships would probably fit better in February anyway. Thanks to my mini break, I was able to calm down and look at this painting from another angle, a monochrome angle. Seeing that the colors were the main issue, I decided to paint in grayscale for a while and worry about how the colors looked later on. This way, I can focus on the small leafy details on the trees, dirt, and flowers. Contrary to what some may think, this approach isn't used only by digital artists. It actually has a long history in traditional painting. This technique is called en grisaille, or in gray. En grisaille is a method in which the underpainting is executed entirely in monochromatic tones. It helps artists focus on values or the lightness and darkness of a painting without being distracted by the colors. Thanks to en grisaille, painting the background became much less stressful than it was before. As the seasons shifted from a sweltering city summer to a dark, chilly autumn, Carmi and 𝔬𝔯𝔢𝔓 became constant companions, having spent 3 months since her arrival in Thistledown practically tied by their tails. At this point in their friendship, their connection has matured into something deeper and much more complicated. They've both reached a point where their mutual struggles with self-worth and depressive issues are an open book they casually enjoyed reading to each other about. Ever since Carmi stopped being a shut-in back in Faunus Acre, she's become the type to wear her heart on her sleeve, talking freely about her demons with those she feels she can trust. But the real miracle here is what Carmi's done to 𝔬𝔯𝔢𝔓. He started unmasking, letting his guarded walls crumble to show a nerdier, more awkward side he hides from everyone else. Carmi is sort of tethered to 𝔬𝔯𝔢𝔓 at this point, as he's her only friend in Thistledown, but she's not the only one losing sleep worrying if she's impressing her friend. Despite having a social circle that should keep him busy, 𝔬𝔯𝔓 can't seem to shake the thought of Carmi out of his mind, and he can't figure out why. Their friendship isn't perfect, but this is the healthiest it'll ever be. Once they reach the point of no return, these happy days will never arrive again, no matter how much Carmi tries to go back to them. The day began as just another part of their weekly routine, a casual hangout that Carmi assumed would follow their usual script. But little did she know that today was her debut. In a move that defied his own logic, 𝔬𝔯𝔓 decided to introduce her to his inner circle. But thanks to their one-on-one hangouts, 𝔬𝔯𝔓 miscalculated how this meeting would go. 𝔬𝔯𝔓 had a growing appreciation and love for Carmi's eccentric personality. He found a fascinating intellectual streak in the little Pollyanna. But how could Carmi possibly keep up the buttoned-up facade he had established, especially with no warning? Before his friends arrived, 𝔬𝔯𝔓 had told Carmi that he had felt closer to her than he'd ever felt with Brother Tiger. By claiming a bond with Carmi that runs deeper than his lifelong friendship with Brother Tiger, 𝔬𝔯𝔓 had created an isolated secret world where only the two of them exist. For Carmi, who has spent this arc trying to overcome feeling like she's a burden to her family, Wolf's confession grants a rush of validation. Carmi now feels uniquely special, and yet laces their friendship with the tainted guilt. It encourages Carmi to take a protective stance over her friendship with the emotionally suppressed Wolf, causing her to retreat from her brother's reach and lean deeper into Sir Wolf's parasitic embrace. And in this embrace, he casually mentions that he's broken up with Grease. In an attempt to establish a boundary while making him feel better, Carmi had relayed her own issues with love, confessing that she'd only ever been lusted after and never experienced genuine romance or a relationship. Sir Wolf grew quiet for a moment and encouraged her that she'd find the love she was looking for. Carmi smiled back at him and relayed that she hoped he'd find the same one day. Just like any other time they hung out, Carmi was wearing one of her more frilly Lolita-inspired outfits, and since she knew she was going outside that day, as per usual, she would go all out. Sir Wolf had always enjoyed her strange outfits, as he was attracted to the uncommon, but when his friends saw what she was wearing, they were less than enthused, and Sir Wolf was pulled back into his cutthroat, skewed reality. Carmi had noticed that her unorthodox style had made the air heavy, and she started to feel a pit in her stomach, wishing that she had chosen to wear pants and a t-shirt that morning. Hoping to clear the awkward air, she attempted to woo them with her natural charisma. And if you know Carmi by now, charisma doesn't come naturally to her. So she was digging a deeper hole for herself every time she attempted to make conversation. The moment Carmi began ruining his image, Sir Wolf discarded his feelings for her and cast her back into the leveling system. Any softer feelings he had for Carmi were discarded into his subconscious. He now saw that, in combination with the past traumas she confided in him about, Carmi simply wasn't the type of person he could envision an actual future with. But Sir Wolf wasn't done with her just yet. He found that his eyes often trailed down to her thighs when she wasn't looking. With his desires growing rapidly by the hour, he thought that maybe if he could get just one taste, to be able to see what her body looked like, perhaps he could be satisfied with just that. In the quiet night of their embrace, the milestones Carmi had dreamed of for years had bypassed her entirely. Before she could experience her very first kiss, before she could hear "I love you" escape from his lips, Sir Wolf had taken her virginity, leaving her blindsided in the dark. Thanks to the engrais method, when I was in the final stretch of the painting, I didn't have to do intense rendering in each session, since most of it was knocked out of the park in small doses throughout the process. In my initial sketch, I wanted the main parts to be framed like a physical painting, illustrated within the composition. I originally wanted a tiger in one lower corner to symbolize Brother Tiger's need to protect Carmi, but because of their physical and emotional distance, the only thing he can do is watch his sister lose herself in these problems she won't confide in him about. In the upper corner, I wanted a sphinx to symbolize Grandma being a mysterious, mystical figure watching over Carmi at all times. I really did try to make them work, but it was much too distracting, so I had to erase all of it. Well, almost all of it. As a memento to my efforts, I left a garland with only the word Finn hanging over our two lovebirds. In a healthier setting, Carmi and Sir Wolf could have been an unstoppable pair of friends. On one side, there's an artist who values intellectualism, and on the other end, a softer energy with an intense creative spirit. In a toxic state, the intellectual becomes dogmatic and emotionally cold. Under their domineering scrutiny, they expect total loyalty and perfection, but tend to offer little warmth in return. The creative spirit is naturally sensitive and peace-seeking, has a hidden streak of impulsivity and a broken ego. They're highly intuitive, but prone to emotional instability. In a toxic state, they completely martyr themselves if it means they'll get a crumb of validation from the other, regardless of whether it hurts them or not. In case it wasn't obvious by now, Carmi and Sir Wolf are in an enmeshed, toxic relationship. Their connection was established on a shaky foundation of deep-seated traumas and maladaptive defense mechanisms. This is made worse by Carmi's lack of respect, causing her to disregard her morals for someone she's obsessively attached to. In Sir Wolf's mind, Grease represents his ideal partner. Despite the fact that their relationship is also heavily toxic, he finds himself more loyal to Grease because he's deemed her worthy of commitment, enough to put a public title on it in the very least. There's a guilt in the back of Sir Wolf's mind that causes him to pull away coldly, but he doesn't pursue Carmi because he wants to hurt them. He does so out of a selfish enjoyment of the thrill of the hunt and the utility of pleasure Carmi gives him while his real girlfriend is far away in Frostfell. To him, Carmi is a toy that is voluntarily available. Because 𝔲𝔯𝔱 is being honest about not wanting a relationship, he can quickly absolve himself of guilt. In his mind, he thinks, I told them what this was. If they stay, that's their choice. At the same time, if he feels Carmi starting to pull away, he captures her heart by giving her tiny crumbs of romance she's starving for, like little meaningless I love yous that make Carmi's heart flutter. While it confuses her, it gives her hope that maybe one day he'll see how much she wants to build a life with him. Whenever Carmi pursues a deeper romantic connection, 𝔲𝔯𝔱 reflexively retreats behind his walls, reverting to his usual cold and distant self. It isn't unusual for Wolf to ignore Carmi's texts for days, or respond harshly to her love for him, which in turn triggers her fear of abandonment. To Carmi, 𝔲𝔯𝔱's silent treatment is collateral damage from a past wound, a wound she can mend with more sex, more compliance, and more good behavior. She believes that any action that fails to please him is the reason why he distances himself from her. She believes that with every mistake, she's reopening his wound, rather than it being driven by Wolf's own guilt and manipulative desires for Carmi. Even if the sex hurts her, to her, it's inconsequential as long as he's hugging her afterwards. And sometimes, she doesn't even get the hugs she degrades herself for. And just to be clear, I want to note that sex in a general sense isn't a degrading act. Intercourse does not cause a loss of dignity. The tragedy is that her low self-esteem has convinced her to settle for being a side chick, making her a willing participant in cheating just to feel a sense of connection. Convinced that her dignity was stripped away from her long ago, Carmi believes that this is the best life will ever offer. Carmi's mindset can, understandably, be confusing to grasp for some, and I don't blame them for not understanding her motivations. Most of Carmi's issues can be solved by improving their confidence and then cutting people like 𝔲𝔯𝔱 out of her life. Hopefully, I can remedy this by explaining what exactly urges her to make these decisions. The catalyst is a childhood trauma, neurodivergence, and a desperate search for security in her life. Every relationship Carmi has with others can be organized into 3 classes of unhealthy attachments: enmeshment, codependency, and disengagement. Carmi is intensely codependent on her brother for both her protection and emotional needs. Despite being an adult, she struggles to fall asleep on her own due to reoccurring night terrors. She attempts to be independent, she simultaneously feels innately incompetent, believing her very existence hinders her brother's life. She makes the right moves to detach herself from her brother, but is driven by the wrong motivations, leading her into a cycle of seeking a knight in shining armor to replace the protector she already left. This leads Carmi to become codependent on 𝔲𝔯𝔱, which eventually transforms into enmeshment. The enmeshment begins with the blurring of boundaries during their intense early connection, but it never evolves further than that, leading to over-involvement where partners lose touch with their own needs, goals, and feelings, sometimes stemming from a past trauma, fear of abandonment, or a need for security that becomes excessive. It develops so gradually and so non-maliciously, the partners involved don't notice the levels of toxicity in their dynamic until it's too late. Carmi's enmeshment with 𝔲𝔯𝔱 is already catastrophic, but it's solidified when he takes her virginity. In the first part of 𝔄𝔯𝔱 𝔓𝔬𝔂, Carmi's virginity is seen as more of a joke. She's often teased for it, but she's also heavily persistent on saving it for the right person. Carmi has experienced various sexual traumas, so her still being a virgin after such close calls overblows the importance of her virginity in her mind. To her, virginity is the last smidgen of purity that wasn't stolen from her in childhood, so she wants to give it to the right person she'll spend the rest of her life with. Both 𝔲𝔯𝔱 and Carmi over-rely on each other for validation and identity, making separation anxiety-inducing for either side. Carmi just expresses herself more, especially since she's the main character, so the audience gets her perspective more often than Wolf's, making it seem more intense on one side, but we'll get into that later. At the beginning of 𝔄𝔯𝔱 𝔓𝔬𝔂, Carmi is asocial and intensely frightened of the outside world. Most of her relationships could be described as either codependent or disengaged. Her disengagement is a survival tactic planted in her past from unconsensual encounters and bullying from her peers in her adolescence. She retreats into her fantasies, influenced by shoujo manga and otome games to avoid the harshness of real social interaction. It's not as if she believes she is superior to others, she's just extremely frightened of them. So, to remedy this, Carmi gradually learns to overcome these fears by stepping out of her room more often and interacting with the public. By the time she's in Thistlewood, she's convinced that she'll find the love she's been looking for by putting herself out there more often, but she believes putting herself out there is more like pretending to be cooler than she actually is. Hey, the fact that she's outside at all is a huge improvement from the shut-in she was before, but that doesn't mean she's automatically cured her social anxieties. Because she's autistic, her peers underestimate her, which Carmi internalizes as being useless and dumb. She engages in unsettling, abrasive self-criticism whenever a social interaction goes poorly, no matter how many times Brother Tiger tells her that there are people out there who will love her for who she is. Her mind is honed in on the people who are ableist towards her, desperate to go out of her way to prove them wrong. Now, it's 𝔲𝔄𝔢𝔡's turn to be put under the microscope. Under the pretense of Brother Tiger's praises, 𝔲𝔄𝔢𝔡 presents himself as a knight in shining armor to Carmi, but his internal ego is governed by a need for control and a fear of vulnerability. 𝔲𝔄𝔢𝔡 also struggles with disengagement, but unlike Carmi, this is his primary defense mechanism. He maintains an aloof and cool demeanor to ensure he remains unreachable to others, including his best friends. He believes showing his true self would leave him vulnerable to emotional sabotage due to a combination of events from his former years as a pup, his estranged relationship with his parents, and his previous failed relationships. I would not go so far as to classify 𝔲𝔄𝔢𝔡's parents as villainous, but I will label them as incompetent and neglectful. Kids who grow up in poverty already have to mature faster than kids that don't, but on top of that, 𝔲𝔄𝔢𝔡's parents were also emotionally neglectful and at times, from his father, physically abusive through discipline. So all in all, they were absent-mindedly malignant and participated in vile actions, regardless of their intentions or overall love for their child. This fueled 𝔲𝔄𝔢𝔡's intense hatred for incompetence, leading him to create a leveling system to overcorrect for his parents' mistakes. He treats social climbing as a method of survival, categorizing everyone by their utility and mental integrity. By viewing the incompetent as non-existent, he shields himself from potential emotional harm. Despite the facade he puts on of not caring if Carmi gets into a relationship or has sex with someone else, 𝔲𝔄𝔢𝔡 resource guards Carmi. He becomes jealous of other men and women around Carmi while refusing to commit to her. He uses Carmi's feelings for him to create a safe space for her, then exploits that vulnerability for his own ego and physical needs. He gets a dark thrill out of mistreating someone, only for that someone to come running back to him. 𝔲𝔄𝔡 may pretend that he doesn't notice Carmi's feelings or pain, but he's actually highly aware of them. 𝔲𝔄𝔡 would crumble at the thought of Carmi hating him or seeing him for what he is, or at least how he views himself. He's afraid of what will happen when Carmi finally sees him based on his actions, not based on his troubled past or future potential as a loving partner. Carmi, while being a lovable main character on a surface level, is inevitably someone with heavy sexual trauma and low self-worth, which results in her being an active participant in betrayal by being 𝔲𝔄𝔢𝔡's side piece, even if he's the one who's, intentionally or not, exploiting her situation and want of being loved. Although both of them indeed have self-worth and depression issues, it doesn't change that 𝔲𝔄𝔡 views Carmi as a utility to aid his ego, even supposing he sees her as a precious utility. He objectifies both of his lovers by compartmentalizing Carmi as a profane lesser, an object to fulfill his desires, and Greece as a civilized sacred equal, an object of devotion of whom he can love publicly. To 𝔲𝔄𝔡, vulnerability is weakness, and wearing your heart on your sleeve as Carmi does allows for a loss of control that is unacceptable by his standards. This is why Carmi fails to be a sacred equal in his eyes. 𝔲𝔄𝔡 doesn't hate Carmi in an obvious way. He doesn't want her to get physically hurt and thinks of himself as a protector in her life. If you asked him if he hated her, he'd probably get mad at you for even having the thought, but he's subconsciously disgusted by Carmi's vulnerability. Carmi allowing herself to be hurt just because she has feelings for him makes him go cold towards her. He ultimately finds Carmi repulsive, which is why he avoids her in public settings and is nicer to her in private, but still wants to have sex with her, which he intellectualizes the feelings behind as well, refusing to believe that there was ever a moment of romantic intention behind it. He justifies his cruelties towards Carmi because she hates herself enough to consent to it. Carmi is like a caged bird with an open gate. She really could leave any time, but believes she won't be fed or watered any better if she does, and hates herself so much that she believes she doesn't deserve to be treated any better. 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓 is disgusted by this, but rejects the idea that he's the one who put her there in the first place, getting jealous when she inches toward the exit of the gate or bribing her with affection when she's unsure. This is complicated further when 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓 suggests that they keep their relationship secret, especially from Brother Tiger. This also isolates Carmi from talking to the one person she feels comfortable talking about her personal life with. It may still seem like this enmeshment is not really an enmeshment, with Carmi being more attached than 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓. But as I said, 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓 would crumble at the thought of Carmi seeing him for what he is. Even when he's disgusted by her and sees her as a profane lesser, he angelizes Carmi because she still treats him with a gentle kindness and still loves him unconditionally, despite seeing his darker side, which, ironically, contrasts with how Carmi believes in a loss of purity within herself. Okay, so now is probably the best time to talk about the White Wolf. I have a tiny confession to make. When I drew him for the 30-day challenge on Instagram, I labeled him as 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓 in the character section. But to be totally honest with you guys, that was a lie. Well, kind of. I was gatekeeping my own lore, but I'm ready to come clean now, I promise. It's blurred within the subtext of 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓 Acre on whether the White Wolf is a real person or a metaphor, but it can be explained as both. The White Wolf is a concept in which one's hamartia, darkest desires, or flaws will consume them whole. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, one's hamartia is a character fault or a mistake that causes someone to fail or be destroyed. To be overcome by one's hamartia is the same as being consumed by the White Wolf. And in 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓 Acre, every character is susceptible to being devoured by their own obsessions. It's not just Carmi who can be a victim of this. Every 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓 Acre character I've talked about so far, and will talk about in the future, is walking on a thin tightrope on which the White Wolf is waiting at the bottom for them to slip. For example, Brother Tiger is in a stagnant state in which he's rather close to being consumed by the White Wolf. If he never learns to show vulnerability healthily, the mask he wears around others will become his actual face, and he will lose the sanctuary he built with Carmi. Because of his similarities to 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓, if he were to become consumed, there's a possibility that he will follow a similar path. Brother Tiger must use his moral integrity and help from others to ensure this doesn't happen. Meanwhile, both Carmi and 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓 have already been consumed whole. Even in the first part of 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓 Acre, when Carmi still lives in her hometown and 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓 is more of a benevolent side character, he has already succumbed to the will of the White Wolf. 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓's problems aren't fully revealed until Carmi gets close enough to him to know. Before moving to Thistledown, Carmi was in a similar spot to her brother, right at the jaws, and each decision she made would either point her in the direction of freedom or consumption. Once her perception of herself was fully distorted, this is where she willingly let herself be cannibalized. Now, in the context of the painting, this is why Carmi is holding a dagger. Not to literally kill 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓, but to show that the only way to free herself from the belly of the White Wolf is to cut herself free. As much as she wants someone to save her, and as deserving as she is of protection, the only way out is to gut her hamartia. Ta-da! Here's the finished painting! Ugh, nice to be free from this one. It may not look like it, but it was kind of hellish to get through this one. I never expected to put so much time into it, but I think it's important for artists to have these kinds of interludes between the easier pieces. I love drawing ponies, but if I only ever drew ponies and nothing else, I'd probably drive myself to insanity. Artistically at least, challenges like this help us see where we need to improve and what we already excel at. Thank you for joining me on this picnic, and thank you for watching until the end of my video. If you've been following along all this time, you now have a glimpse into my process. I hope you're inspired to unleash your own creativity and paint your own work of art. Think about how you can use these methods we explored, like 𝔲𝔯𝔢𝔓 or symbolic posing, to create impactful visuals that'll communicate your message. What do you think of the different techniques I used in this illustration? Do they contribute to the overall feel, or was I way off track? Let me know, but treat me gently if you don't mind. I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on the painting overall. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a picnic. Bye bye! Thank you to Little Mystery Beast for being my very first Patreon member. I love talking with you about my art and my OCs, and I'm so very grateful for the support. Stay cozy this winter, little bunny.